60 years ago, one devastating moment signaled the end to the greatest conflict the world had ever known. Dictators had been defeated, a Holocaust stopped, tyranny vanquished. People began to put together the broken pieces of their lives. Many had hope, a few dared to dream. And in the most unlikely place, a small city in Western Canada, a young pastor had the boldest vision of all. Jack McAllister was just 22 at the time. Childhood polio had kept him from the battlefields of World War II, but he was ready and willing for spiritual warfare. In sparsely populated Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, Jack lifted his eyes and looked on the fields of the world, and God ignited in him a passion for souls. He determined to communicate the message of the gospel to every person possible, in every place possible. Jack started a radio ministry and called it the Tract Club of the Air. With infectious enthusiasm, he rallied his listeners to join him in providing gospel literature to believers in Canada and to Christian workers overseas. He was convinced that the printed page could bring transformation in every society. He also believed that the primary messengers should be native Christians. It was a controversial position at the time, but his conviction led to a pivotal strategy. The 1950s were years of tension and trial. A tug-of-war between East and West kept anxieties high and fears rampant. While Western nations became more prosperous, half the world's population fell under the cloak of communism. War split Korea in two. An Iron Curtain descended upon Eastern Europe, and China became the domain of one ruthless man. For the Tract Club of the Air, the byword was opportunity. Opportunity to fulfill Christ's call to go into all the world and proclaim the gospel to every person. A methodology called the Every Home Strategy was introduced. Its purpose was simple: go to every home in a village, city, or nation and deliver a printed gospel message. The messengers, able to speak the language and relate naturally in their own culture, would tell the good news to everyone willing to listen. The ministry expanded exponentially in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. The Little Tract Club of Saskatchewan had become a tract crusade to the nations. People by the thousands were turning to Christ. The global reach led to a new name: World Literature Crusade. Under the banner of WLC, native workers distributed millions of gospel tracts and booklets. It was a highly effective strategy. In the tumultuous decade of the 60s, the world teetered on the edge of chaos. A so-called Cold War gripped East and West, with the threat of nuclear calamity. World leaders were assassinated, bloody conflicts erupted, and the social fabric of nations was torn to shreds. Behind the Iron Curtain, the vice of communism clamped down even more severely. Despite the tumult, World Literature Crusade stayed focused on its mission. Regardless of current events, people needed Christ more than anything. So WLC's dedicated foot soldiers kept spreading the word, and people kept receiving it, believing it, and being transformed by it. As the organization matured, indigenous Christian leaders emerged in scores of nations, taking the initiative in reaching the lost and making disciples. Ministry partners in Canada, the U.S., and other prospering nations supplied financial resources and prayer support. Hundreds of thousands of people came to faith in Christ, and WLC nurtured them through Bible courses for new believers. The 1970s brought no respite from global discord. An American president resigned in disgrace. South African apartheid became more vicious, and genocide silenced millions of Cambodians. Terrorism raised its ugly head at home and abroad. At the Munich Olympics, the PLO kidnapped and killed the Israeli team. And in Canada, violent crimes by the FLQ led to the October crisis. Throughout the 1970s, World Literature Crusade expanded at an amazing rate as total responses climbed into the millions. In places where churches did not exist, WLC began to establish gatherings of new believers called Christ groups. Development of indigenous leaders set the stage for generational growth. First in North America and then around the globe, WLCs changed the World School of Prayer, enlisted an army of intercessors. Prayer-related initiatives flourished, and the EHC outreach was energized as never before. The 1980s was a decade of highs and lows. A near assassination in America, a radical charter of rights and freedoms in Canada, wars in Lebanon, Afghanistan, Iran and Iraq, famine in Ethiopia, a meltdown in Chernobyl, a terrifying virus in nations worldwide, a toppled wall in Berlin, a fresh wind of freedom in Eastern Europe. For World Literature Crusade, the 1980s were years of challenge and change. The ministry had become broader, and its reach had extended to over 190 countries. A new name, Every Home for Christ, was chosen to reflect the home-to-home strategy through which millions were hearing the good news. More and more Christ groups matured into spiritually healthy churches. Specialized tools for evangelism were developed and implemented, and through it all, lives were changed by the power of Christ. Paradigms shifted dramatically in the 1990s. Technological advancements were revolutionizing business and personal communications. After 70 years of oppression, the Soviet bloc disintegrated. In Western Europe, 10 countries formed a new union. Ethnic cleansing racked the Balkans. The Taliban dominated Afghanistan. Genocide raged in Rwanda. In Canada, Quebec's separatist movement came within 1 percentage point of dividing the nation. The fall of the Iron Curtain opened doors to places long forbidden. EHC rushed through those doors, seizing an historic moment. In Russia and the former Soviet states, millions of homes were visited by EHC workers. From Ukraine to Siberia, the spiritual harvest was great. Elsewhere in the world, the mission to reach every home was pursued vigorously. EHC was a leader in the quest to identify and evangelize unreached people groups. In Africa, the gospel transcended racial barriers. In Europe, ministries led by EHC pioneers made a global impact. In Asia, the word went out to more people in more places than ever before. Across the islands of the Pacific, hundreds of EHC evangelists were sent out as missionaries. And in Latin America, lives were forever changed through ministry, from the Amazon basin to the megacities of Brazil. The world is not getting better. In fact, wickedness will increase in the last days. Many will call for peace, but peace is impossible apart from Jesus, the Prince of Peace. And the revolution most needed is one that happens in each human heart that turns in faith to Him. In the 6-decade ministry of EHC, that heart transformation has happened in millions of lives. More than 45 million people have written to tell us of their decision to follow Christ. And those are just the ones we know about. Over 100,000 Christ groups have been formed, and over 1 billion homes have been personally visited. Today, we're reaching more people than ever before, even in the world's so-called closed fields. The ministry of EHC has happened through partnership. The linking of like-minded men and women whose hearts are in tune with what matters most to God, the rescue and redemption of desperately needy people. Without Him, they have no hope. Just like the disciples sent out by Jesus 2,000 years ago, EHC workers go out 2 by 2. Teamwork increases their impact, and that's how it is for us too. When we unite as partners in this historic cause, God enables us to accomplish more together than we possibly could alone. EHC is energetically fulfilling Christ's commission. We're establishing strategic ministry centers, caring for orphaned and abandoned children, training workers and developing leaders, all in the cause of evangelism. In Canada, we're launching our biggest evangelistic outreach ever, an initiative called Mission 33. And around the world, we're launching a bold venture called Hope Partners International. Its impact will be monumental. Billions are still waiting to hear the good news of Jesus. Let's join together in reaching them. The laborers are willing and ready, but they need our partnership in the gospel. An EHC partner is one who wants to make every opportunity and every penny count for Christ. People just like Jack McAllister, who was willing to lift his eyes and look on the fields that are white unto harvest. People who realize that this gospel of the kingdom must be preached in every home, to every person, for the glory of God. Please contact us today to find out how you can be a partner of hope to impact the nations of the world with the power of the gospel.